When it comes to Tonex, there seems to be two different schools of thought. School number one is that anybody utilizing a tone model of a specific amp should just utilize that tone model without tweaking it at all. Don't touch any of the gain, bass, middle, treble, presence, depth controls at all. Just leave it alone, because if you do, you're destroying the so-called integrity of the amp tone model. And then there's the second school of thought where folks say, well, the tone model as it is a great starting point, but I'm going to have to tweak it a little bit to get it to fit my guitar, my taste, my monitoring system. I tend to lean much further towards that second school of thought, simply because I understand that a person's monitoring environment, monitoring system, guitar, and the biggest thing is their tastes are not going to necessarily be satisfied by one particular tone model or any particular tone model, and they may all need a little bit of tweaking. But the problem is a lot of folks who feel they can't do that end up maybe not being quite happy with it. Well, today I want to talk about how we can all maybe get away from that. We can all dive in and actually go to extremes, I'll say, to really explore what Tonex Pedal or software is capable of as far as tweaking. And I've talked about these controls in different videos, but today I'm going to take a different approach. And as I said, go to extremes with them. And I think this is one of the best ways to kind of get over the idea that we shouldn't be touching any of these controls, knowing that they can be powerful, but they also aren't destroying anything when we do utilize them. So without further ado, we're going to dive over to Tonex software today. Again, this applies to Tonex Pedal as well. It's just much easier for me to showcase it on the software. So let's head over to Tonex software within Cubase, and we'll get going on taking this to extremes. So here I am over in Tonex software. You'll notice that I have actually one of my latest tone models from my Brit 45 Ultimate and DI collection that I just released this week. This is a set of captures based off of my brand new and also just released Marshall Studio Mini JTM. What a killer amp. This thing sounds beautiful. Captured it through a Celestion G12 M65 greenback loaded cab as it comes actually as a combo when you get that amp from Marshall in the combo version. And that speaker sounds great with it. Real vintage vibe to this. So I thought this would be a really cool one to explore this idea of going to extremes. I do have a free tone model from this bundle available at my website below. I'll have the link and the full collection there as well if you're so inclined and want to go check it out. Later in the video, I'll play you a full in the mix audio demo utilizing just these tone models without any of the tweaks we're going to talk about today. So as you see here, I'm using my Brit 45 Push 1. This is the high input or the high treble input. I have the gain on 5, bass, mid, treble, volume on 5, presence and depth on 5. We're not going to really be talking about reverb and compression. I do have just the tiniest bit of compression on this. I am using my Vigier GV Wood with P90 pickups, really nice guitar with this particular tone model. So I have a dab of reverb as well, room reverb, just doing what it does. But let's come up here to the advanced parameters, and we're going to also just take a look at the front panel parameters, keeping in mind that some of these are the same as up in the advanced parameters with some extra things thrown in we'll talk about. So what do I mean by going to extremes? Well, let's start over at the presence and depth, as those are kind of fixed controls, meaning we don't have any ability to tweak the frequencies and the Q as we do with the shelf EQ and the parametric EQ over here. So if I take something like the presence control, one thing a lot of people will do is if they do use it, they may make really tiny moves, and that's fine. That's okay. It can work perfectly that way. But a lot of times it's just because if we do this, that visual kind of makes a lot of people uneasy. It's like, well, I shouldn't have to move it all the way up. But we never really go there and even listen to what it does. And that's a bit of a problem, because until we understand what the different extremes of each control do, we really aren't going to have an idea of whether we should just be moving it a little or a lot. And really and honestly, I'm of the school of thought that if I do bring this all the way up or all the way down, if it's giving me the sound that I want, then I should be able to do that. Now, I'm not saying that this particular tone model needs this. I'm just using this as an example, nor am I saying you should crank these up. I'm just saying that don't let your eyes make the decisions for you. Let your ears make the decisions. And if you have a tone model that you absolutely love and you have the presence on 10 and everything else on 5 or whatever else it might be set at, and it's sounding perfect, then that's what you should do. It's not destroying the integrity of that tone model. So let's take a listen here again. If I control click that, I go back to my default settings. So this here is just how this tone model was captured. Real nice gooey vintage vibe to it. Loving this amp. I can't get enough of it lately. Okay, what happens if I take this presence control and crank it all the way up? Don't think it's destroyed the integrity of the model at all. Let's go back to its in stock position. Keep in mind, anybody making tone models could have added a similar thing in the chain that was captured. So the idea that we're not getting the same tone model anymore if we tweak these is a little bit silly, because we don't really know what the person capturing the tone model added in the chain anyways. Maybe they've already played around with the sound. Let's go to the other extreme now, just so we get an idea of the range of this. Taking that back to default. So you really see that it was kind of usable within all of that range, but now we have a better feeling of whether we want to go maybe here, or maybe we just want to leave it as it is. I actually really dig this, just the way I dialed it in. All right, let's take a look at the depth control. Crank that up. Add some very big girth to the bottom end. I really think the presence and depth can really be a couple of the most powerful controls within Tonex, and can really help us quickly, either subtly or to an extreme measure, tweak and shape our tone to just be perfect. Back to the way it was captured. You know, so we even took both of these and went to extremes with them. Keep in mind the presence and the depth are post-amp. So whatever we do here is not going to affect the gain structure of the amp. If we have this after the amp, we can crank it up. It's not going to hit the front of the amp harder and make it distort more or less if we pull some out. Whereas with the EQ here, we're going to look at in a moment, we have the ability to set it post or pre. I pretty much always have it set to post, because again, as I'm tweaking this, I don't want it really hitting the front of the amp different and affecting the amount of saturation I get from that amp model. So we see the presence and depth control, even at extremes, extremely usable. I think the folks at IK Multimedia did a great job kind of making these work in a very musical way. So, you know, some EQs, if you crank them to 10, they just become out of a range that's even close to being useful. But that's not the case here. Really, depending on what you start with, we shouldn't be afraid to kind of push this if we need to, right? And some tone models won't need it at all. I'm actually very happy for certain situations where this tone model would just be perfect the way it is. Now, as far as the bass, middle, and treble, the treble and the bass are both shelf EQs, and we can decide what frequency we want them at. So let's come over here at the stocks, and you can always hit Control and click, and that'll take you back to whatever the default setting is. Let's go to extremes. We'll crank the bass up. And while we're there, we can adjust that frequency. by bringing that frequency quite low and bringing the bass all the way down. We can just control the really low frequencies, which may be or maybe not a problem, right? But if we just come back here again, we see the extremes here. You know, we shouldn't be afraid to come in and utilize this. We want a little bit more or a lot more. Mid-frequency now is going to be a parametric EQ. So we can control not only the frequency, but the bandwidth or the Q of that, the width of that, how many frequencies it's going to take up or how many frequencies it's going to actually affect. So here we are at 750 hertz with a Q of 2 octaves or 0.7. Now, while we're there, we can also grab the frequency. And just back to the stock settings as it was captured. And then off to the treble frequency, which is going to be a shelf EQ as well. Default setting is at 2000 hertz, I believe. We'll crank that up. You know, again, visually a very extreme setting. And I do think even using my ear that that's too much, but it's amazing that it doesn't completely obliterate the sound. See, combining different controls, we can really shape things in an interesting fashion. So back to just the stock setting. You know, so somebody who wants just a little more bite out of that and maybe a little less bottom could come into the depth, pull that back just a bit, add a little bit of presence, a little bit of treble. Depending on what you want to do. Now, another feature that we can use is the gain control, which is just basically the input level that's hitting the front of the tone model. So we can really control how these models are going to clean up. This is basically very similar to just rolling off your guitar volume on your guitar itself. But again, I can come back and just center everything else off. So we can see even by going to these extremes, it doesn't totally destroy the tone if that in fact is what you're looking for. But again, if everything is just back at 5, and you're not going to see the bass frequency, mid frequency, and mid Q. Those aren't going to have any effect at all if the mid and the bass are at 5. If the treble is at 5, then the treble frequency, bass frequency, mid frequency, they're not going to even be involved. So as long as we are looking at these parameters here and everything is at 5, that's going to be exactly how this was captured as the original tone model. So there you have it. I hope that that was helpful. This video was more just an awareness video. It wasn't really to tell you what you should do or whether you should be pushing your presence all the way up or all the way down or your depth all the way up or all the way down. It was just more to make people realize, like, no matter what I did today, no matter how extreme I got, the integrity of the tone model stayed intact. It still sounded like that amplifier and that capture. It was just maybe tweaked better for a particular situation or for somebody's tastes or, as I mentioned, their monitoring system or the guitar they're playing. So once we've explored with whatever tone model we use, once we've explored the extreme settings, gives us a better idea of what that particular parameter does and will probably give us a little more confidence to not necessarily go set it to those extremes in the situations we're using it, but to just maybe know that we can tweak it a little bit and feel more confident that we are still utilizing the same tone model, just shaped and tweaked to suit your situation better. I hope that was useful. I want to leave you today with the demo video for my Brit 45 Ultimate Tone Model Bundle, which is available. There's a free preset down at the link below, and there's also the full collection at another link below from my website. If you're so inclined, want to help support my channel and help me to keep make these videos, you can grab the full collection. I really hope you enjoy the tones. I've been having an absolute blast with them, and I hope you enjoy the demo video I'm about to show you of these tone models without any tweaking. These are just as they're dialed in before any of the tweaks, used together in a mix in conjunction with other tone models from this particular collection. So everything you're hearing is right from this with no tweaks or post-processing after the fact. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification, get notified when I put new content out. I will be back very soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. Ciao for now.